Right now, the world faces a terrifying crisis. The fuel rods and the spent core at Fukushima Unit 4 are 100 feet in the air. It's hard to comprehend, but the General Electric design, which was the design used at Fukushima, set up the fuel storage pool to be 100 feet in the air. And as a result of the accident, the residual rods from this unit are in a very, very precarious position. Now, we know that the earthquake did tremendous damage to Fukushima Units 1, 2, 3, and 4. Thankfully, Units 5 and 6 were higher up and were not as badly harmed. We have had explosions at Units 1, 2, and 3, and the cores from Units 1, 2, and 3 are in the ground somewhere. We don't know exactly where they are. The utility company, TEPCO, and the Japanese government have been pouring water onto the site, hoping to keep these cores cool.
Hi, I'm Arnie Gunderson from Fairwinds, and today I'd like to talk to you about fuel pool fires. Are they possible? What causes them? And what are the consequences? Related to that is, why is everybody focused on Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4? Before I get into the details, I need to go back and touch on a couple of basics. Inside a nuclear reactor, the uranium splits. And when it splits, it gives off 95% of the heat. That's what makes nuclear fission so neat, is that one atom can give off an incredible amount of heat. The problem is that 5% of the heat remains in these pieces called fission products. That heat gradually decays away over 5 years, but for at least 5 years, these pieces, these fission products, have to be cooled. That part of the reaction doesn't occur in the nuclear reactor. It occurs in the spent fuel pool. Remember now that the uranium is in a pellet about the size of my pinky. And these pellets are put into about 12-foot long rods. And the rods are made of a material called zircaloy. And that's the problem.
Unfortunately, we have had steam emissions at the site, which indicates there's still at least some heat coming from one or more of these cores. The problem right now is Unit 4. Just prior to the earthquake, Tokyo Electric Power Company removed the core from Unit 4 to do routine maintenance and refueling. And they put that very, very hot core into the fuel pool 100 feet in the air. When the earthquake came, it significantly damaged the building at Unit 4. It may have damaged the fuel pool. It may have damaged some of the fuel. And for the last year and a half, since March 11th, 2011, this fuel core, with some 1,300 or more fuel rods in it, it weighs 400 tons, and it contains as much radiation as would be necessary to deliver 13,000 times as much radioactive fallout as was released at Hiroshima.
Zircaloy can burn in air if it gets hot enough. And it's called pyrophoric. So when it starts to burn, water cannot put out the combustion. Now, these pellets and rods are put into bundles. The bundles are about that big and 12 feet high. And those bundles are then lifted out of the nuclear reactor and put into the spent fuel pool. Now, we know zircaloy can burn. The question is, can that happen in a nuclear fuel pool? And what is it about Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4 that has everyone concerned? There are 4 reactors in jeopardy at Fukushima Daiichi, but everyone's attention now has been focused on the fuel pool at Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4. Why is that? Well, in the Mark I design, there is no containment over the fuel pool. That means that if there's a problem in the fuel pool, there's nothing to trap the radiation and prevent it from going airborne. At Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4, though, an entire nuclear fuel core had just recently been removed from the containment, from the nuclear reactor, and was put into the spent fuel pool. That's what makes Daiichi Unit 4 unique. It's got an entire nuclear core out of the reactor, out of the containment, and in the fuel pool. Related to that, though, is the fact that Fukushima Daiichi 4 is also damaged. There's a bulge in the bottom of it, and I believe it's something called a first mode Euler strut bulge, and it clearly is an indication of a seismic damage. This is not something that happened from the explosion. The building has been damaged from a seismic event. So Daiichi Unit 4 has an entire nuclear core out of the containment in a spent fuel pool, and the building it's housed in has been previously damaged by the explosions in the building and by the seismic events that occurred since March 11th of 2011.
Now, the problem is that this core, these fuel rods, have to come to the ground somehow. They can't stay up there. It's almost a miracle that they've been cooled as long as they have to sustain the cooling system in a damaged building to a pool 100 feet in the air has been quite a feat. It can't continue forever. The other problem is that the earthquake situation at Fukushima continues to be volatile. We have had numerous aftershocks, and it's only a matter of time before a large enough earthquake comes through at Fukushima to crumble the rest of Building 4 and knock these fuel rods to the ground. Building is damaged and it's sinking because so much water has been poured onto the Fukushima site to try and keep the other cores cool, and because of the nature of the aquifer, there's actually a natural kind of river that is flowing through the Fukushima site now, carrying radioactive materials into the Pacific Ocean. This has weakened the substructure, the ground on which Unit 4 and the other buildings at Fukushima are resting, and the building at Unit 4 is actually tilting and sinking into the ground. In addition, there's a common spent fuel pool 50 meters from Unit 4, which contains more than 6,000 fuel rods. Overall, there are 11,000 fuel rods at the Fukushima site. We have to understand about these rods, by the way, they're the most lethal substance human beings have ever created. If a rod had been in this room when we started this interview, we'd be all dead right now. It is incredibly toxic stuff. In addition to that, the fuel rods are clad in zirconium alloy. Zirconium alloy will spontaneously ignite if it's exposed to air. That's why it has to be kept underwater at all times. Zirconium is actually the element that was used in those old flash cubes that used to burn so bright and so quickly when you took a photograph in the old days. So this zirconium alloy is incredibly dangerous, and as I say, it needs to be kept cool 100% underwater, or it will ignite, and it burns very hot and could in fact cause the fuel rods to catch fire.
That's why all eyes in the world are focused on what's going on in Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission wanted to know if a fuel bundle can burn in air too, and they commissioned Sandia National Labs to run a test. Just by coincidence, the test was done about 2 weeks before the Fukushima Daiichi accident. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission wanted to know if a fuel bundle can burn in air too, and they commissioned Sandia National Labs to run a test. Just by coincidence, the test was done about 2 weeks before the Fukushima Daiichi accident. Now, this was a test of a nuclear fuel bundle, but I need to be clear, there was no spent nuclear fuel in the bundle. The heat from the pellets was simulated using electric resistance heaters, pretty similar to what you've got inside your toaster. So this was a test to create the same amount of heat that the fuel pellets would create, but it was done with electricity, not with spent nuclear fuel. Other than that, though, the fuel bundle was identical to the bundle that's in a nuclear fuel pool. Now, this is a 5-hour video that we've condensed down to about 1 minute. The screenshots that we've taken for this show in the upper left a picture of a fuel bundle with wires going into it. That's the electricity that's designed to heat the fuel, and wires coming out, those are monitoring wires. And on the far right is top to bottom looking at the fuel bundle from the side. There's an enormous amount of data collected in these 5 hours, And all of it is on the Sandia site, which we link to from this Fairwind site. The first video shows a bundle immediately before the heat was applied. Shortly after is the same bundle, the heat is on, and it's already beginning to smoke. A little further on is the bundle again, smoking considerably. Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. The last one in the sequence shows the bundle on fire. Now, what you're seeing is zircaloy burning in air. There was no match applied to start this fire. It just got hot enough so that it began to combust of its own volition in air. Just to be clear one last time, that was a simulated test we just watched using electricity in place of spent nuclear fuel. But it's clear that a single nuclear fuel bundle can burn in air.
The health risks of this kind of accident are almost incomprehensible. You have Tokyo, one of the world's largest cities, with a huge conglomeration of human beings less than 200 miles away. The cloud from Fukushima from this kind of accident would not diminish in its lethal capabilities. We're already seeing hotspots in Tokyo from the releases that have come now that are very, very dangerous. Radiation does not come down in some kind of magically evened out average dose. You get huge clumps of radiation that coming down, which are lethal. We've seen it at 3 Mile Island and at Chernobyl, and already at Fukushima, where the thyroid abnormality rate among children is starting to look very suspect. So this cloud, depending on the winds, would eventually, one way or another, make its way to Tokyo. Wind does eventually go in 360 degrees. Generally, the winds, unfortunately for the United States, blow straight out into the Pacific, but that means they carry all the way across the Pacific Ocean. A cloud the size that could be released from a major accident with this fuel pool at Fukushima 4 would come to California within less than a week. The entire West Coast, from Alaska, Washington, Oregon, down to California, and certainly into Mexico. It would be a lethal cloud. Children and the elderly would be affected first. It would go all the way across the United States. It would contaminate our food, our milk, our water, and recircle the globe a number of times. The initial cloud from Chernobyl was very clearly detected going across the United States within 10 days and came back again within the month. And so we would see the permanent contamination very quickly of the northern hemisphere. And you have to understand, a cloud 13, 15,000 times as potent as the one that was released at Hiroshima is a lethal dose to many millions of people.
Now, Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4 would be even worse. Inside Daiichi's fuel pool are 1,500 fuel bundles, not one, 1,500 fuel bundles, 300 of which are just removed from the nuclear core. So instead of one very hot bundle, we've got 300 very hot bundles. Now, it's even worse than that. The Japanese put all of their nuclear fuel from this latest core offload in a very confined space in the pool. In America, we don't do that. We call it checkerboarding. We'll put hot nuclear fuel next to cold nuclear fuel in a checkerboard pattern so that there's a gap between them. But the Japanese didn't do that. This entire nuclear core is side by side with other physically hot bundles. So is a fuel pool fire possible at Fukushima Daiichi? We've got the video evidence to show it is. And what can make it happen is the real question.
Officials at Tokyo Electric Power Company are facing another setback in their efforts to decommission the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. They found the level of water in one of the reactors is lower than they thought. They say they don't know whether it even covers all the nuclear fuel inside. NHK World's Yurito has more.
The March 11 earthquake and tsunami led to meltdowns at 3 of the plant's reactors. But officials don't know about the condition of the melted fuel inside. They've been trying to cool the fuel by filling the reactor containment vessels with water. but water has been leaking from the reactors. Earlier this month, workers used a probe to measure the level and temperature of water inside the vessel at the number 2 reactor. A similar measurement 2 years ago led them to estimate the water was 60 centimeters deep, but now they've found it's only around half that. Officials believe the water level at another reactor is about 10 times deeper.
We cannot tell at this point whether the fuel is entirely submerged or if part of it's above the water.
The official says the temperature of the water is around 35 degrees Celsius. He says that suggests it's keeping the melted fuel cool. TEPCO officials suspect water is leaking through a pipe into a unit called a suppression chamber. They believe it's flowing through the chamber, then out of the reactor building. Workers will try to plug the leak, but they haven't been able to find out exactly where the water is leaking from. TEPCO officials say they may use a camera-equipped robotic probe to take a closer look. Yuri Ito, NHK World.
So the implications of a fuel pool at Fukushima that loses its water in the air, or where the rods deteriorate to the point where they can catch fire, or that falls to the ground with an earthquake or the crumbling of the building, or that's mishandled by TEPCO or whoever else is doing it, trying to bring it to the ground. These are all situations that can result in a radiation release that would impact many, many millions of people, not just in Japan, not just in the United States, but all over the world. The removal of these fuel rods is probably going to put the world in the most precarious position that it's been since the time that the U.S. and USSR were, facing each other down at Cuba and elsewhere with nuclear missiles. The amounts of radiation we're talking about here are lethal on a global scale. Tokyo Electric Power has said that they want to remove these rods and try and bring them down in November. We don't believe a private utility company, certainly not TEPCO, which has had a terrible track record already at Fukushima, is capable of doing this job. They don't have the financial, the technological, the scientific resources. They've just earmarked another $10 billion for the Fukushima site, but it's not sufficient. The government of Japan has stepped in, but the government of Japan has a vested interest in not letting the world know how serious the situation really is. They've just secured the 2020 Olympics, which is astounding to me, but nonetheless, we can't trust either entity.
During those days, the pool began to heat up, and it heated up at about 18 degrees Fahrenheit, about 10 degrees centigrade every day. This is a huge pool. It's 300,000 gallons of water. And to think about 300,000 gallons of water heating up at 18 degrees a day gives you a feel for the amount of heat that's in that pool. So after about a week, the pool would begin to boil. And after about another week, the pool would begin to boil to the point where the top of the nuclear fuel was exposed. And an event like we saw on the Sandia Labs video, it would indeed become possible. So the Japanese have about 2 weeks in the event that the fuel pool cooling system fails to fix it. I don't think that'll be a problem. I think they could fix almost every cooling problem in 2 weeks. The real problem is if there's an earthquake. The building is already structurally damaged, and if the pool were to drain from an earthquake, then all bets are off. There's no way to cool the pool, and we know that the heat source is astronomical. The fuel in the pool would catch fire, and the uranium that's then encased in the zircaloy would go airborne. Brookhaven National Labs did a study back in 1998 about this, and they estimate that over 180,000 cancers would result from a fuel pool fire, and that an area of about 40-mile radius would have to be permanently evacuated. Now, the Brookhaven study had less uranium in it than the Fukushima fuel pool, so the odds are that if a fuel pool fire were to occur at Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4, it would in fact be worse than the Brookhaven study. Regardless of what the nuclear industry claims, a fuel pool fire is possible if the water were to drain from a seismic event. Now, this is not just the Fukushima Daiichi Unit 4 problem. There's 23 Mark I reactors in the United States, and they have even more nuclear fuel in them than Unit 4 at Fukushima Daiichi. This is an international problem, especially in the United States, because we have the most of these Mark I reactors. What can we do about it? We can put the pressure on Tokyo Electric and on the Japanese government to get the fuel out of that pool just as quickly as possible. We can't wait for an earthquake to be proven right or wrong. In the United States, we can demand that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission take the fuel out of these fuel pools in the 23 nuclear reactors that are identical to Fukushima Daiichi. Right now, industry pressure to save money is preventing those fuel pools from being emptied. Fairwinds Energy Education has tried to bring forward several really important worldwide technical issues since the accident at Fukushima Daiichi. One of them is the condition of spent fuel pools in the Mark I design. Again, we're asking for your help to continue with our energy education efforts. Maggie and I take nothing from Fairwinds Energy Education, but it does cost money to produce these videos and to do the research and development that support the videos. We're very grateful for the donations we've received so far, and we would appreciate your considering a donation now so we can continue into the future. Thank you very much. I'll keep you informed.
Explosion that was captured on video of one of the reactors exploding in Fukushima, and the explosion, the smokestack of a small nuclear device were extraordinarily similar. So I then started looking at anything that could have explained this. And I came across the fact that in the years leading up to Fukushima, those reactors and that site in general had installed a new surveillance camera and sensor system with these, this technology put into the reactors and other parts of the site. And then when you put one of those next to what they call a gun-type nuclear weapon, which is a small nuclear device, if you take the casing off the gun-type nuclear weapon, what is inside is, shall we say, not a million miles from what these cameras and sensors look like. And it was, with other information, it was my view, I concluded, that these were small nuclear devices and that Fukushima was blown up on purpose to release that radiation as part of this much wider radiation agenda to irradiate the atmosphere of the planet much more than it has been up to this point. And then I asked the question, who put these devices in, these sensors in? And it turns out to be an Israeli company located at Dimona in Israel. And Dimona is the location of the massive Israeli nuclear weapons program. And I can tell you from 22 years of research, there is no such thing as an Israeli security company that is not a front for Mossad. It's not allowed. And then there was a man called Arnie Gunderson, who's a nuclear engineer. And he made a speech in Boston, and it was almost like an alert. It was like, hey, we found something about Fukushima which should not have happened, and this has great implications for you know, containment design and nuclear design. And what he'd found from the footage is that the explosions at Fukushima moved so fast that they passed the speed of sound, and entered the realm of what is known as a detonation wave. And as he pointed out, a nuclear explosion at a nuclear plant like that should never, ever become a detonation wave. It produces what they call a deflagration wave, which is below the speed of sound. And his alert was, hey, we had no idea this was possible. He says, I've talked to a bunch of chemists and we can't work out how it is possible for a nuclear explosion at a plant like that to cause a detonation wave. Well, maybe it wasn't a nuclear explosion of that kind that caused the detonation wave, but a device designed to detonate. And it is my strong view that Fukushima was blown up on purpose to release this stunning level of radiation. They know that Fukushima and that earthquake and tsunami and everything, they know it was created. It wasn't a natural event. And what that says to them, and what they're saying to them with that event is, if you say no to us, look what we can do. If they want to bring Japan to its knees, they've got to find a way, like they did in with the two, you know, Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of the Second World War. But today they would have to find an excuse to send the boys in. Well, they can't find an excuse. So instead of that, we'll go the way that they have, because Japan is over. It's over. The amount of radiation that has been released into the Earth's atmosphere is potentially catastrophic. The amount that's been released in the immediate area around Japan and the wider Japan is unthinkably catastrophic. And we you know, I mean, people are already starting to go down with the effects of it, and we've seen nothing yet. This was a, you know, you have these James Bond movies, written by a British intelligence agent, by the way, where you have the guy on the island with the fantastic technology, or the guy with the satellite in the sky that can, you know, cause devastation on Earth. And he holds the world to ransom on the basis of I won't use it only if you do this. Blackmail. Well, this is what's happening in the real world.
We never bowed our head to anyone. On the contrary, all the great powers bowed their heads to Russia, China and Japan, Germany, France, and the United States. It is not just about allowing foreign wine imports to Russia. I see it as a global issue. We used to block import of all goods, from Moldova and Belarus to our markets too. I don't think there is any direct link between Russia's joining the World Trade Organization and the problems associated with some exports to Russia. I think Russia has enough leverage to influence Georgia and get permission to join the WTO. The solution will be found regardless of wine and customs. Now add to this that Washington has no future, that artificial state will collapse. Now add to this that Washington has no future, that artificial state will collapse. Then this old Europe will collapse, a continent with no importance whatsoever. China is also about to explode. And what remains is Russia, in possession of orbital launch capability and space power. Russia with lots of money and resources. And new weapons, which nobody knows anything about, not yet. With these weapons we will destroy any part of the planet within 15 minutes. No explosion, no ray burst. Not some kind of a laser, not lightning. It is a common quiet weapon instead, with which whole continents will be put to sleep forever. That's all for now. There was that tsunami in Japan, right? I say, if you want even the tiniest Ural island from us, you will have to dig in the wreckage and debris of their buildings. And 120 million of you will all die. And that goes for the rest of the world too. Everybody should start thinking about their own future, and the future of everybody else. Then there will be another tsunami on the other side of the planet. In the Caucasus, that will be the end of you.
Because of this technology that they have. And, you know, Tesla, in an interview with the New York Times in the 1940s, I think it was, maybe a bit earlier, he said that he had the technology to split the Earth in half. Then he was producing lightning around his home in New York. The neighbors were calling the police. He was causing kind of mini earthquakes, getting the earth to shake because of the technology he had, and thousands of windows were breaking before he could switch it off. And Bernard Eastland, the man who applied, first of all, for the patent for the technology that is used in HAARP, based in Alaska, but there's connecting technology all around the world. That's just the main focal point. He mentions Tesla when he's applying for the patent. It's Tesla technology. And if Tesla could, do that devastation he said he could do back in the 1930s and 40s, what the heck can they do now? So instead of, it's not really a case of, what do you mean they can cause earthquakes? That's crazy. No. Causing earthquakes is a piece of cake. But you can do it through HAARP and earthquakes. And the weather wars and the geological wars are not some science fiction fantasy. They're happening now.
In the reality of the global economic slowdown, money still makes the world go round. In the circles of vice and lust, political maneuvering and corruption. Is money the source of all evil, or just those who control it? Are banks there to keep the people's wealth, or to steal it? Can any government be called honest? Who runs the economic and political scenes?
Our guest today is whistleblower Karen Hughes, former senior counselor at the World Bank. Karen, it's great to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Sophie. I'm glad to be with you.
So the government shutdown, is the move on the part of the Republicans justified? Is fighting off Obamacare worth all this mess?
I think there's something more going on behind the scenes. A lot more, actually.
What do you mean?
Well, there is a terrible currency problem. We're on the verge of a currency war. The Federal Reserve is printing dollars like there's no tomorrow, and if they keep going, the rest of the world is not going to accept them. As it is, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have decided that they're going to finance the trade among these countries with offsets and pay for the difference in gold. And
but
this
how is that connected
the right
with the
move
shutdown,
for them,
though?
because the U.S. Congress has been fighting with the presidency because the presidency has been in total contempt, and the highest legal officer of the United States government has also been in contempt of Congress in fighting this international corruption that is ruining the dollar as an international reserve currency.
But, you know, economists have been predicting the dollar will fall ever since the crisis in 2008. But the government has managed to keep it afloat.
Well, not for long. If you look at what's going on in the gold and other precious metals markets, silver as well, we're headed towards something called permanent gold backwardation. That means that there's a loss in confidence in the fiat currencies that are issued by those private banks. They like to consider themselves as public banks, but they're really owned by private entities. And these currencies are about to crash because they're valueless. That's what always happens to paper currencies that aren't backed by assets.
But, well, like you've mentioned, gold backwardation. Gold is often chanted as perfectly safe investment, an alternative to the dollar even. But how come the price of gold is falling?
Because of market manipulation. But that can only continue for so long because the central banks are running out of gold and the rest of the world are lining up to buy them. If you want to buy gold today, you have to pay a premium. What they're offering in the future is called a naked short. They don't have the gold to back those offers. That's illegal what they're doing.
I will get back to gold in a bit, but for now I would like to focus on Obamacare. In your opinion, is Obamacare really that crucial for the U.S. economy?
What you have is something that's very good for the medical insurers, because most of the other countries that offer medical coverage do this through a single issuer. And that's not what we have here. What we have here is a bill that was drafted by the medical insurance companies. It's not good for this economy. It never was.
But why? Why do you say it's not good?
Because what's happening is the workers that worked full-time are being put deliberately on part-time basis so that the companies can avoid giving them medical insurance coverage under the provisions of the law.
You know, this Obamacare thing, I've heard it many times being compared to socialism, communism sometimes even. Do you trace the resemblance?
That's just because the mainstream media, when they report about what's going on, are doing it by telling lies and anything that's good for the powers that be. The mainstream media is completely owned and controlled by the same companies, private companies, that own the Federal Reserve System. Most of the American citizens are clueless about the corruption that's rifling their economy.
But just to make sure, are you saying that everything about Obamacare is bad? Or are there good things about it?
No, of course there are good things about it, but the problem is that the people that wanted to get a decent coverage were not given the tools. They were not given the equipment. They were not given the press coverage, the honest press coverage that a society needs to enact just legislation. Their congresspeople are all bribed by these corrupt forces. And the American citizens have zero confidence in their Congress.
So at this point, you side with the Republicans for blocking the Medicare?
I'm not siding with Democrats or Republicans because both of those parties have been co-opted by this terrible corrupt force that I'm talking about.
What we have right now is Americans being forced to get health insurance. How does that go with their love of liberties and freedom of choice?
It's not so much a question of being forced. You have to look at those parts of the society that have been thrown under the bus. The uneducated children who are not given a superior education like we used to have. We are a society that is giving short shrift to the people that need us. I'm not saying that we ignore the health needs of our country. I'm saying that we ignore the mainstream media because they are not telling us the truth.
You know, I've also heard Obama supporters argue that the American capitalism is on the verge of death in its present form, the way it is existing now, and the social injections, meaning the Medicare and Obamacare, are needed is the only way to reform it or save it. Do you agree or disagree with that?
The problem is not with the American citizens. They are a wonderful group. Their values are good. It's just that they're not given the tools that they need to have a just society. They're not given the basic information about what is really going on and who's benefiting from the economies that they're being told. They're being told that they have no money. They have taken an entire city, Detroit, and declared it bankrupt, when what's actually happening is their tax dollars are not even staying in their society. Their tax dollars are going by treaty to the United Kingdom, and then they're being transferred to the Vatican, to the Bank of the Vatican. This is not a society that's going to be sustainable on any basis, for any reason.
But do you feel like American economy is picking up? Because we hear President Obama saying the shutdown hurts American economy, but at the very sensitive moment when it has just started to catch up. But do you feel like it's catching up, really?
Oh, those numbers about the employment are completely fabricated, because they're not counting those people who have given up ever finding a job as unemployed. That's ridiculous. The real rate is just about double what they report it as being.
So the American debt looks like a doomed patient. Is there any other possibility for it than just grow into eternity forever? I mean, raising a debt ceiling once or twice a year, what's the problem?
The problem is actually, when you talk about debt, that our currency is financed by debt. Our currency is issued by the Federal Reserve instead of the Treasury, it's unconstitutional. When the Federal Reserve System was instituted in 1913, most of the Congress was on break. They sneaked that legislation through. So the debt is there simply for those bankers to put an interest on it and have it grow and compound every year. The debt is a fabrication. It's probably should be repudiated, but it can't be repudiated until you've looked at all of the implications.
But do you think it's going to go on and on forever?
No. What I think is going to happen is that at the upcoming Bretton Woods meetings on October 9th, the countries of the world, the foreign ministers of the world, are going to sit down and have a rational basis for currency rather than this fiat currency, which is absolutely, what can I say? It makes no sense to anyone but the bankers that are issuing it.
So when you look at the concept of the debt, it's much more than just borrowing money, right? It makes you controllable. For example, in the case of the U.S., who controls it? You mean the big corporations or countries like China and Japan who control large chunks of the debt?
Well, that's a very good question, and fortunately, some mathematicians at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology have given us a very precise answer. They did a study of who owns and controls the companies on the capital markets, 43,000 companies. And they found out that there's a secret super entity, they call it, that owns 60% of the earnings every year and 40% of the assets. They did this by putting the same people on the boards of these companies. So they have 10 times the economic power that they're entitled to. And they thought no one would catch them at it. This is a huge conglomerate that has been rigging the LIBOR prices. It's been rigging all of the commodities prices. It's been trading in the securities markets with insider information. It has got to be stopped. It also bought up all the media and has been lying to people deliberately. This is going to stop.
So just to answer my question, the government is controlled by the conglomerate or the corporations rather than countries that are up and coming economically, right? So why haven't these corporations or conglomerate, as you call it, been caught? Why is nothing changing?
That's the whole point about it. They like to think they're in control, but they're not. They're not above the law. And we citizens know exactly what they're up to. We've been working on this problem. All of the governors of the states have been working on this terrible corruption. So have the attorneys general. So have the sheriffs. And it's not going to continue. The American people are taking back their government, and they're stopping this terrible corruption.
Mm-hmm. You know, as of today, the United States is a financial heart of the world. And whether it collapses or keeps on going, it's obviously wrong this much power is concentrated in one place. Asia is a rising monster right now. Could it be that stealing his financial role from the U.S.? Do you think China, for example, could steal its financial role from the United States? Or are they also controlled by the same financial elite you're mentioning?
Well, I can tell you that the Jesuits have a very strong stranglehold on China as well. But I can also tell you that the transition of economic strength from the Western countries to the East is going to happen, but it's going to happen in a smooth way. It's not going to be a transition through a currency war like that terrible, corrupt group is trying to manipulate everyone into. No, we're going to have a peaceful power transition this time around. We're not going to have World War III. They tried to pull it off in Syria. They're now thinking they can pull it off in Iran. It's not happening. The citizens of the world see what they're doing, and we're not letting them get away with it this time.
Welcome back to the show. We're talking to Karen Hughes, World Bank whistleblower. Good to have you back. Foreign governments keep buying U.S. Treasury bonds despite obvious problems U.S. economy is facing. What's making them do that, in your opinion?
I think the biggest market for the Federal Reserve notes is the U.S. Treasury, and there is a glut of dollars right now. But yes, there's also a small market. Unfortunately, the market is weakening as the dollar weakens because of all of this, what they call quantitative easing, where every month so many additional dollars are printed with absolutely no backing.
Mm-hmm. You never told me in the first part, should we be buying gold?
Well, yes and no. I think gold is probably a wise purchase right now, but more as insurance than investment, because there's actually a great deal of gold. There's even more gold than people know about. For example, the amount of gold that's in deposit in the Bank of Hawaii is 170,000 tons. This is more than the World Gold Council says is available for all the gold on Earth. People don't know how much gold there is. There's a lot of gold.
Are you buying gold?
I did, actually, yes, but not because it's an investment, but because I'm not 100% certain that we're going to get our act together before all of the paper fiat currency falls apart. So I see it as insurance, but because of the amount of gold that's actually around in the world, in deposit all over the world, I'm not so sure it's a great investment.
So you think the return to the gold standard is a realistic thing? It could be a possibility.
Well, actually, that's not such a good thing. The currency ought to be backed by value, but there's no reason why it should be restricted to precious metals. It could be any of the commodities that are valuable. But the important thing is that, yes, the currency should be backed by assets rather than by debt, as we now have.
Mm-hmm. But if a financial collapse happens, let's say, right, will gold be of any use? I mean, if there's a shortage of food, and look at the world today, the biggest problem we're facing is the clean drinking water. What's gold going to do about that?
Well, first of all, I think that we're going to manage to get our act together. I'm not expecting a collapse. A very accurate game theory model is showing that we're going to manage to make a transition in a very smooth way. Maybe there'll be a few fits and starts, but I think most of the countries of the world are in favor of working together and not to have a collapse. The only thing that you're seeing is some of these crooks haven't figured out, they haven't seen the writing on the wall, they haven't seen that we understand that there's a way to work together and avoid these problems, which are definitely avoidable.
Mm-hmm. So Karen, you were a senior counselor at the World Bank. Tell me something, honest banking, is this an oxymoron?
No, we have examples all over the place. In the United States, the state of North Dakota has its own state bank, and many of the other states are looking at that. At the moment, 22 other states are looking at it, and we're urging the other 28 states to look at it. There was a bank in Amsterdam that I think went on for 300 years with no problem. We know how to do banking. It should be like infrastructure to support the economy. It shouldn't be for the benefit of elites that think they're above the law, as we currently have. If you look at the Bank for International Settlements, that institution was established when the war reparations were being exacted from Germany after World War I. And that's when it was started in 1930. And I believe it's 60 central banks that are members of the BIS. Those are the culprits. Those are the ones that really need to go out of business.
Now, you first blew the whistle over corruption in the World Bank. Tell us more about your revelations.
Well, that's actually what happened. I was working in the Philippines, and there was a bank. This was at the end of the East Asia financial crisis in the end of the 1990s. And the second largest bank in the Philippines, Philippine National Bank, there was a loan to strengthen the banking sector. And what happened was a man who owned Philippine Airlines, Lucio Tan, ended up buying more than 10% of the shares of Philippine National Bank without informing the securities authorities in the Philippines. That was against the law. And then I told the person who was in charge of the World Bank lending program that they should tell the government of the Philippines that the conditions of the loan were not going to be met. And instead, I was reassigned, and I didn't accept that, so I went to the meeting where it was decided whether or not to disperse the loan, and I said that the board was not being informed that the conditions weren't met. And then what happened was the loan wasn't dispersed, but the people who had their money on deposit in that bank withdrew their money, and the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation had to withdraw, had to back up the bank for $500 million. And then we didn't disperse our loan for $200 million, and the Japanese didn't disperse their loan for $200 million. So that was $900 million worth of poor loan performance. And when the evaluation department in the World Bank said that the World Bank had performed satisfactorily, I corrected that report, and my correction was never given to the board. So that was a cover-up. And I just, you know, you can't have a cover-up in a bank. That shows that money is going the wrong way. And I've been working together with other whistleblowers at the World Bank because we know that the board has to be informed about what's actually going on. Other whistleblowers have reported double accounting. We've reported this to the UK Parliament. I reported it to the European Parliament in 2011. And the European Parliament wrote a letter to the World Bank. I had a very detailed chronology, and the World Bank never responded. And then I've been reporting this to the U.S. Congress, and when the U.S. Congress was asked to give a capital increase to the World Bank, they had asked for a Government Accountability Office audit, which never took place. So I was reporting this to the International Organization of Supreme Audit Institutions, and then I asked the board to require KPMG to do an audit of the World Bank internal controls, and KPMG did not follow the auditing standards. So I reported this to the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. I reported this to the SEC. But since the SEC couldn't be bothered to sort out the insider trading for the Federal Reserve System, they certainly weren't going to straighten out the bonds in the World Bank. So I bought a World Bank bond and I sued under the securities laws, and I also went to each and every attorney general in the states, and I told the states that they were responsible for making sure that there was accurate financial information going to the bondholders in their states. And I also went to the International Organization of Securities Commissioners. So the World Bank has got to be brought into compliance, and there has to be transparency in the capital markets. And the insider trading of the Federal Reserve System is going to be history in short order.
But do you feel safe after all these leaks? I mean, you were fired.
Well, you know, I've been working with some very wonderful whistleblowers. In particular, I'd like to mention Mark Nowitzki, who's been reporting about insider trading and inaccurate financial reporting for Teletech, which is a company that's been spying on American citizens. So when whistleblowers work together and compare notes and share information, you get a very accurate picture. In addition, I'd like to mention Larry Garrison, who has been my PR guy. So when you have people who you're working with, it's not so easy to shut the whistleblowers down. We've just gained in strength. We're going from strength to strength.
Do you guys feel like you're being heard? Is anything changing?
Well, that's what I'd like to ask your audience.
But do you feel like anything's changing in the system by whistleblowing on it?
Yes, I absolutely do. I think the number of people that are hearing my message and that are looking into this information, and every day they're sending me emails, and they're going out and they're getting their neighbors to find out what's really going on. I don't think this mainstream media is going to have too big of an audience at the rate we're going.
Now, there are liberty movements that are actually picking up now, the likes of Bitcoin, for example. Can they ever grow into a solid rival to the conventional system, you think?
I think they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, yes. as a matter of fact. And there are other similar kinds of payment systems that are now gaining currency. Yes, I think we're going to have a world where there's a lot of choice, and the legal tender is not going to be used to put people into debt and to imprison them.
Are you using Bitcoin as of now?
That's a good question. I'm trying to learn how. It's, you know, yes. There's a conference that's taking place, and I'm going to try to get myself sorted out on that.
Karen, thank you very much for your time. That's all for today. Our guest was a former insider at the World Bank, ex-senior counselor Karen Hughes. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time here on Sophie & Co.